The morning sunlight poured gently through the half-open curtains, touching the worn-out armchair where Robert had been sitting with a cup of tea. He was 71 now, with silver hair, a strong but calm posture, and a face that carried both the weight of years and the wisdom of them. For most of his life, he had lived surrounded by people, his wife, his children, his colleagues, his friends. But now, for the last 6 years, he lived alone. Many younger people assumed that living alone at such an age must be filled with loneliness, with silence pressing down like an invisible weight, but Robert knew something they didn't. To him, living alone was not a curse. It was a gift, a chapter of life that had brought him independence, health, and a kind of happiness that he had never expected to find. The house was quiet that morning, and Robert loved the silence. Silence, he thought, was not empty, it was full of possibilities. He got up slowly, careful with his knees, and walked toward the kitchen. Every step he took was measured, not out of weakness, but out of intention. Years ago, when his wife had passed, he had struggled with the idea of solitude. At first, the house had felt too big, the rooms echoing with memories, the walls whispering the laughter of children long grown. But as time passed, Robert realized that solitude had its own music. It was in the sound of boiling water, the creak of the wooden floor, the distant singing of birds outside. He didn't need constant conversation to feel alive, he needed presence, awareness, and his own company. His children called often, and sometimes they worried. "Dad, are you sure you're okay living alone?" they would ask. Robert always chuckled, reassuring them. He knew they were busy with their own families, and he didn't want them to feel guilty. The truth was, he was more than okay, he was thriving. Living alone had given him a rhythm that suited his body and his spirit. He woke when he wished, ate what nourished him, and spent his hours in activities that mattered to him. There was no one to interrupt his reading when he got lost in the pages of a good book. No one to insist on watching television shows that bored him. No one to argue about what time dinner should be. The independence was liberating, and at 71, liberation meant everything. Still, it wasn't just about freedom. Living alone had forced Robert to take responsibility for himself in ways he never had before. When his wife was alive, she often reminded him of appointments, cooked meals, and managed the details of daily living. But after her passing, Robert had to learn. He learned to cook. Not just simple meals, but real, healthy dishes. He discovered that chopping vegetables could be a meditation, that cooking fish or preparing a bowl of oats with fresh fruit was not just about food, but about care. He learned to manage his medications, to schedule his doctor visits, and to listen to his body. In many ways, solitude had made him healthier, more attentive to himself. He didn't overeat, he didn't rush, he didn't drink mindlessly. He treated his health as a sacred duty, because he understood that no one else could do it for him anymore. One of Robert's favorite parts of living alone was the peace of his mornings. He had developed a ritual. After tea, he would take a walk to the small park near his house. Walking alone gave him time to reflect, to notice the world. He would see children playing, young couples jogging, other older folks sitting on benches. He didn't always join conversations, but he greeted people with warmth. Some mornings, he struck up talks with strangers, sharing wisdom, listening to their stories. These little interactions brought him joy, but he also appreciated that at the end of the walk, he returned to his quiet home, where he could rest without obligation. His friends sometimes teased him. "Robert, don't you get lonely at night? Don't you wish there was someone to talk to every evening?" He would smile and answer, "I talk to myself plenty, and sometimes that's the best company." He didn't mean it as a joke. He genuinely enjoyed reflecting aloud, writing in his journal, or even humming old songs to himself. He had learned that happiness wasn't always about being surrounded by people. Sometimes, it was about being at peace with your own soul. That peace didn't come immediately. In the early days of widowhood, Robert had fought with silence. He remembered nights when the quiet was unbearable, when he wished someone would just walk in and ask him how his day had been. But gradually, he realized that loneliness and solitude were not the same thing. Loneliness was a hunger for connection, but solitude was the satisfaction of being enough for yourself. When he accepted that difference, the quiet stopped feeling heavy. It began to feel like a blessing. He found joy in small things. Planting herbs in pots on his windowsill, arranging his books neatly, trying out new recipes, and listening to the radio. He even joined an online community of older men who lived alone, where they shared tips, stories, and encouragement. That, too, was a gift of living alone. He chose his connections. He wasn't trapped in a household where conversations were forced or where conflicts brewed. He reached out when he wanted, retreated when he needed rest. Living alone also gave Robert time to rediscover old hobbies. He started painting again, something he hadn't done since his 20s. He found himself sketching the trees outside, the wrinkles on his own face in the mirror, and sometimes even the memories of his wife. These paintings filled his home, giving it warmth and life. He often thought, had he been living with others, his days would be filled with noise and obligations, and he would never have had this sacred time with his art. Another quiet benefit of his solitude was self-reflection. Robert often thought about his past, his successes, his mistakes, his regrets. Living alone gave him space to make peace with them. He forgave himself for moments of anger, for missed opportunities, for not always being the perfect father or husband. He realized that aging wasn't just about the body slowing down, it was about the heart learning to let go. That wisdom came more easily in solitude, where there was time to truly listen to one's inner voice. Of course, Robert wasn't blind to the challenges of living alone. There were days when his body ached, when he wished someone was there to help him lift a box or fetch a jar from a high shelf. But he had adapted. He kept things organized, he asked neighbors for help when necessary, and he stayed in touch with his children through regular video calls. He wasn't afraid to ask for help when he truly needed it, but he also took pride in how much he could manage by himself. That balance, knowing when to lean on others and when to stand tall, was part of his strength. He knew some people pitied him, imagining his life as empty. But if they could step into his shoes, they would see something different. They would see a man who had carved out peace in his own company, who had maintained health through discipline, who had embraced independence with gratitude. They would see that his days were not lonely, but rich in small joys. His wisdom had grown sharper in solitude, his appreciation for life deeper. As the sun set that evening, Robert sat by the window, sipping a second cup of tea. The sky was painted in orange and purple, the air cool with the promise of night. He smiled to himself, thinking of how people often fear growing old alone. They don't understand that sometimes, being alone is the greatest gift age can bring. It allows you to slow down, to reflect, to heal, and to cherish each breath. It teaches you that happiness is not something others hand to you. It's something you cultivate within.